All right, let's get right into it. There's a new kind of war playing out right now. Not on a battlefield, but in the shadows of the global economy. It's not being fought with missiles and tanks, but with, shipping ledgers, economic threats, and Coast Guard cutters. And it is pushing one of the world's major powers right to the very edge of collapse. So picture this. The date is February 6th, 2026. You're in the middle of the Arabian Sea. It's out here in the vast open ocean that the first real shots of this economic war were fired. And the crazy part? Almost nobody saw it coming. All of a sudden, 3 gigantic oil tankers are swarmed and seized in international waters. Now, your first thought may be pirates, right? But nope, this wasn't that. This was a highly coordinated, state-sponsored action that sent shockwaves all the way from Mumbai to Tehran. So the big question is, why? 3. That's the key number here. 3 tankers, all of them under U.S. sanctions, and all of them directly linked to smuggling Iranian oil. They were boarded and seized by the Indian Coast Guard. And let's be really clear, this was no random spot check. This was a targeted strike designed to send a very, very loud message. And just look at the kind of force they brought to bear. India sent out 55 ships and about a dozen aircraft to pull this off. I mean, come on, that's not a customs operation. That is a military-grade blockade in everything but its name. So what on earth could make India, a country that has had pretty solid ties to Iran for years, do something so drastic? Well, it all boils down to one single, absolutely devastating threat. A threat that basically flipped the entire geopolitical chessboard on its head. It happened on January 13th, 2026. President Trump gets on Truth Social and drops an economic nuclear bomb. This wasn't just another sanction, This was full-blown economic warfare. He essentially turned access to the entire American market into a weapon, forcing every single country out there to pick a side. And for India, well, here's the brutal math they were staring at. On one hand, you've got about $1.6 billion in trade with Iran. On the other, you're looking at a crippling 25% tariff on more than $120 billion in trade with the US. When you see the numbers laid out like that, it's not really a choice at all, is it? So India's reaction, well, it wasn't some slow, carefully considered strategic pivot. Not at all. It was a flat-out panic, a rapid capitulation driven by that completely impossible economic equation. I mean, just look at this timeline. It's breathtaking. In less than a single month, India goes from being a strategic partner with Iran to enforcing a blockade against them. That kind of speed, it doesn't scream planning. It screams pure, unfiltered panic when faced with an economic gun to your head. And the scale of this U-turn is just staggering. We're not talking about some small project here. The Chabahar port was a massive $370 million strategic investment, a cornerstone of India's foreign policy in the region, and they just walked away. Overnight. The budget was zeroed out, board members quit, a decade of strategic work just gone. Poof. But this incident, as big as it was, wasn't just about India. It was really the first major public battle in a much bigger, much quieter global war. A war against Iran's #1 economic lifeline, its massive secret shadow fleet. So what is this shadow fleet? Think of it like a ghost armada, over 500 ships built up over years of sanctions with one purpose and one purpose only, to smuggle Iranian oil around the world. They operate off the grid in the dark, and they are, without exaggeration, the absolute lifeblood keeping the Iranian regime's economy from flatlining. And the way they hide is incredibly sophisticated. We're talking faking their GPS signals, secretly transferring oil from one ship to another in the middle of the ocean, using mountains of fake documents. But here's the kicker. What that Indian seizure proved once and for all is that with the right intelligence, and it was almost certainly US intelligence, this ghost fleet isn't invisible. It can be caught. So let's just call this what it was. It was a transaction, a deal. India proved it was on board by seizing those ships. And just 2 days later, what happens? The US rewards them by dropping the tariff threat and signs a brand new trade deal. You do this for us, we'll do this for you. Simple as that. So while this whole shadow war is playing out on the world's oceans, the effect it's having back on the ground in Iran is, well, it's absolutely devastating. All this pressure from the outside is just speeding up a collapse on the inside. The regime is truly at a breaking point. And the human cost of this it's just staggering. An estimated 36,500 Iranians have been killed in crackdowns on protests. The regime is literally waging war on its own people just to cling to power. At the same time, the economy is in an absolute freefall. Look at this. Food inflation is pushing 60%. General inflation over 42%. The currency is basically worthless, and millions of people are struggling to eat. This is the definition of unsustainable. But you know what the real tell is? The biggest red flag? Even the regime's own insiders are trying to get their money out. We're seeing huge amounts of capital flight. Senior officials quietly moving tens of millions of dollars out of the country. They see the writing on the wall. They know the ship is sinking. Okay, so you've got this shadow blockade squeezing from the outside and this internal collapse happening on the inside. Both of these pressures are now rushing towards a single, terrifying deadline. We are literally watching a countdown to a major conflict. The date you need to watch is April 26th. By that day, 2 American aircraft carrier strike groups will be in position. India's last ties to Iran will be officially severed. All the diplomatic off-ramps will be gone, and Iran is going to be forced into an impossible choice. And that's the really grim reality of where we are. When you systematically close every door, when both sides publicly refuse to negotiate, you're left with very few options. The path to a military conflict becomes almost inevitable. So think about it. The Iranian regime is completely cornered. Its economy is in ruins, its own people are rising up, and its main economic lifeline is being choked off day by day. So what's its last move? What does it do? When you boil it all down, they're left with a truly terrifying choice. Do they just sit back and accept total economic collapse, which would almost certainly mean the end of their regime? Or do they lash out with their military, risking their own annihilation? That is the unbelievably high-stakes question that the entire world is now holding its breath to see answered.